Welcome to the People Leaders Podcast, the audio resource for managers and business leaders creating high-performing teams. Join leadership and team development experts Jen and Michelle Turkelson each week as they explore both subjects from every angle. Through practical tips, valuable insights, and compelling interviews with leadership experts around the world, you'll learn how to bring out the best in your staff and how to give your best as a leader.
So hello everyone, it's Jan today. I don't have Michelle with me. She is in lockdown in Melbourne and I'm in lockdown in Byron as we speak. And it's really interesting, all the things that come up when you do find yourself in a different situation. And what we're finding is that we're really digging deep on our ability to be resilient and also to shift our perspective moment to moment. And what I'm really interested in is having people on the podcast who can help us with that. So I'm really looking forward to this interview because we have Colin Hunter, who's going to join me this morning. And he's an author, mentor and coach, and also founder and CEO of Potential Squared. Now, this is an international business that specialises in creating playgrounds, to disrupt the way people are led. And they specialise in creating playgrounds to inspire new ways of thinking and habits. And boy, do we need this right now. Now, the habits either to be a leader that you've always wanted to be, or create the leaders that you need to thrive in this environment. And not only that, but there's more. Like Colin has authored a book called Be More Wrong. And he talks about how failure makes an outstanding leader and how to build from your insecurities and how that is an essential element to leadership. So welcome, Colin.
Thank you very much, Jan. Lovely to be here, And also, even if it's just touching briefly into Byron Bay, lovely to be back there.
Yes. Great. So while you're just talking about Byron Bay, do you have anything that you particularly liked about it? Was there a cafe or an experience, or what was it that you resonated with?
Well, I went there with a girlfriend who I was raising her son at the time. So it was a very poignant moment for me on the beaches, just spiritually. It was something about that time, connecting with a 4-month-old baby, a new girlfriend. And we just were Brits sitting on that beach and just wondering why the hell we live in Britain, to be honest. It is such a beautiful place. But I did love the clashes of a degree of culture in Byron as well, because if you take the corporate versus, some of the work that we do, the spiritual type of work that we do, then there is a clash there. There's when I was there, the teenagers were the ones who were rebelling against their parents, who were the hippies, the 60s, and were the ones who were saying, we need to live our lives in a different way. And the kids were the ones who were rebelling, saying, no, we need to get capitalism and we need to get money. So I remember going back to that, and I remember that it's a constant clash that we have versus people versus corporate, money versus people in terms of the agenda and strategies. But I always just remember being happy there. So I remember being on the beach and being happy. And that's an important place for me to go to. Yeah.
And I love that idea about the diversity, the richness of diversity in not only in our life environment, but also work environment and thinking environment as well. Diversity of thought, is very disruptive, and it also causes conflict and clashes. But what comes out of it is just so rich, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a dedication in the book to a gentleman who inspired me. Randy Taylor has unfortunately passed away, and his wife just passed away just recently. But he had this ability to listen to all sides of arguments, and he was part of the Martin Luther King March to Washington. But he had this ability to bring in his strongest opponents into a room and listen and hear and pick up things, and the ability to be able to go, yeah, I hear you. And that is a core part of everything we do. Diversity, inclusion, is that a lot of the times we reject things out of hand. And I reject a lot of the things. Well, I rejected a lot of the things I do now, probably 15, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have done. And I would have said, nah, God, meditation, come on. I wouldn't do that. And now I do it every day. Just, I've done it as I woke up this morning. So I think the inclusion and the benefits, and I think it's the longer term approach to this, the infinite mindset versus the finite mindset that Simon Sinek talks about, which is core to everything we do now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We're singing from the same songbook. So when I was doing a little bit of research about you, I was really interested in some of your principles and premises. And the first one that took my attention was building from your insecurities is essential to leadership. And the reason why I think this is a really interesting perspective is that we coach a lot of leaders, and a lot of leaders think that they have to have the answer, they need to be on top, they need to know and direct and lead, etc. And so how can I do that when I have all these insecurities? Does that make me a lesser leader? So I'm really interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, I started with a massive inferiority complex. My grandfather was a professor of theology and a very, very bright man. And my dad invented echo for babies' hearts. So spent most of his life saving babies' hearts. And they always looked at me as this almost these eyes saying, and so what are you going to do? How are you going to live up to our our expectations in that? And I don't think they deliberately did it. I just think they looked and said, so what are you going to do? And I think, so I spent probably the first 30 years of my life trying to be somebody that they wanted me to be. And that really led to the end. I'm very happy to share, but it led to a breakdown. It led to a breakdown at the age of around 30, where I ended up in tears at my parents' house for 2 weeks. I had run out of energy. And it was a brilliant GP doctor who sat me down, and he just talked me through, and he said, Colin, you've not got an infinite amount of energy in your life, and you've got to manage your life with your energy sources, about sustaining what you have and building on that energy as you go through. But part of that is our insecurities cost us a lot of energy. To be this logical thinker, which I'm not, was causing me to spend my days doing something like tax consultancy, which my dad thought would be good for me, and it wasn't. And therefore, I had to find my own path, my own energy. And I spend most of my coaching days now trying to get people to strip back to what is the real person. If you took work and life out and said life, what is the real authentic person? Where's your real passion? And I have a reputation in coaching sessions in a good way for tears. People will say, bring a box of Kleenex, to go to the sessions. Because what I'm aiming to do is get to the real source of your passion. And normally that is something that is hidden under so many workarounds, adaptations to take the design thinking way that we've added into our lives to cope with our insecurities. And therefore, how do we use those? How do we use our screw ups? I was recording the video for the book on Friday. And I was shouting it to the heavens, your insecurities can make you fly. And I remember doing this and thinking, do I believe this? Yes, I do. As the drone took off from me and whooshed off into the sky, I thought I do believe that, because that's what I've managed to do. And a lot of my clients have managed to do on the back end of the work that we do with them. So that's great.
So could you give us an example, because I've just been thinking, okay, so what would I consider an insecurity, and how could I actually turn that around to be an element in my leadership?
Yeah. So I'll use one of the bits of feedback I get on a negative side. I don't particularly like this, Colin, is I have a refreshingly direct side. So I'm very blunt, direct, honest. Yeah. And that almost creates an insecurity in other people about this person must have confidence, conviction, and connection. So they must have, the way they're confident, they vocally and physically speak is strong. So, wow, God, hold on a second, I can't match up to them. And then the conviction is that I speak with value. So I speak with, conviction around what I believe in, how I come across, and they're going, so I'm not sure what I believe in. And then I speak with connection. So hopefully I make connections with people, welcome people into the conversation. So there's an insecurity that I have, which I share, which is I get nervous. I get nervous doing this, a podcast. I get nervous speaking in front of people. I get nervous, just have this insecurity that I'm always waiting to be found out. I'm an owner of a business. I'm an author of a book. I'm expecting the book to fail. That's my insecurity. But actually, what that gives me is a real power because I don't believe I'm going to be successful. Then I've got nothing to lose. There's a bit about my screw ups. Well, why not? I'm not going to try do what everybody else is trying to do. I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to. And if it fails, well, what the hell? In my own mind, I'm failing at the moment. So it's using that power to think, okay, so I screwed that up, but we've actually got our clients to practice this with us, to fail with us. So they have agreed that we will stretch ourselves, we'll rest, we'll reflect, and then we'll grow. And therefore they know that they're going to fail. Probably within the first month, they're going to get feedback. And the people going through the programs are the ones who are saying, we're asking them to say, well, we're going to fail. This is a prototype. This is an experiment. We need your feedback. And they are so into it. So there's an insecurity that I can use. Now, first thing is, do they believe me that they see competence, conviction, connection? Do they believe I have an insecurity? But yes, if I tell them the stories of where I've been, yes. So you've got to have your stories of your insecurities, and those will feed those. Hopefully that's a good example. I don't know if it is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what comes to mind for me is the importance of feedback. And also the importance of recognizing what we consider as failure is an opportunity for us to see as growth. Because if we hadn't done it before, we would just continue to do the same thing. Whereas if we think that it's a failure, then that's a kind of like a stopgap. It's like, oh, okay, I need to stop and reflect and look at this. So I love that opportunity for perspective. And also when you were discussing, you were talking about your programs, and I'm really interested in your virtual programs, because now a lot of what we are doing is we are training and coaching virtually. And a lot of people, like talk about, you can never really get the impact as opposed to face-to-face, whereas we're actually experiencing differently. So I'm interested in your programs and your experience.
Yeah, I mean, the real shock. I mean, 2019, December, we made a decision to go virtual as a business. We got rid of the office. We went virtual for many different reasons. Luck was one of them, and then COVID hit. But we then switched to virtual, and I'm one of the big believers. I thought, no way virtual is going to work. Face-to-face is better. But our scores are better in the virtual than they were in the face-to-face. Now, I miss a hug like anybody. So I miss seeing my clients, hugging, social contact, all of that. But what we found in there was there's a real strength for introverts. There's a real strength that they don't need to be in a group of 20 in a room and hide. They can hide on Zoom, and they can contribute, and they can duck in, duck out. But also what we learned is the way that because of technology, the filtering of some of the learning and development meant we could get the actors on. So we use actors to bring to life conversations. So we could get the actors on screen. We could allow everybody to switch off their camera, and they could hide, but they could watch. And that everybody loves virtual reality and TV and, the whatever it is, Gogglebox or whatever in the UK. I don't know if you've got something similar in Australia, but people love observing. And so therefore, I think that what people have found is they're at home, they're in a safe space, they can learn, they can contribute, they can duck in, duck out in a good way. And also, I think there's a piece in here that when people are at work and trying to learn and develop, they have their work hat on. When we talk to people at home, we're getting an insight into their house and their home. Now, for some of them, it's a real challenge, but for the majority of them, that's been, I've met so many daughters and sons through this process over the last 18 months, or cats, or dogs, or whatever it is, that I love it. And I'm getting an insight into another side of those people. So it's successful, but we've had to innovate. Yeah, the actors on screen, for a lot of our actors, they've had to innovate because they're used to being face to face and doing these conversations face to face. So they've done that. We've also brought in virtual reality, which is amazing. So putting the headsets on people virtually and then going in. And what we find, and this is a link into the hybrid world that we're going to go into very shortly with all organizations, is how do you level the playing field? And with a headset on in virtual reality, you're level setting the playing field for everybody to have a go. So we're doing very well. We've had to bring in new platforms, Torch, a learning experience platform. But again, that gives somebody who's a real book nerd to go in and start to read. They've got the ability to just quickly go through it, but they've got the ability to record their own videos for us to manage it. And it's round the clock. So, international global business, we can review videos while they're asleep. We can pick up with them in the morning. And we've also not needed to have facilitators in location, which for us has been massive, and for organizations has reduced the cost. So it's a win-win for everybody, really. I mean, I know everybody still would love to get back to face-to-face, but I don't think it'll ever permanently go back to face-to-face. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear. And I hear what you were talking about, having that safe space. So when you are in your own environment, that threat response is lessened. And a lot of our listeners understand the SCARF model, and they know that the brain reacts to either threat or reward responses. So whenever we can create an environment that lessens the threat response, our cognitive functions enhance, massive opportunity for that higher level thinking. So I totally understand that. What I'm really interested in is when you said that you have actors, can you give us an example of what would be a typical scenario where people can learn from that conversation? Like, what is the most requested scenario that people want to work through?
Well, it's interesting because you would have thought it's direct report coaching. But actually, the biggest one is influencing upwards. I think that's the biggest need. People influencing upwards, influencing my boss. And we have what we call a tailored role play, where the actors are given a brief from somebody. So say, Jan, you were in one of our programs. You would come in and say, I don't know if Michelle's your boss or not. I don't know how the authority levels work in your organization. But say you have a boss, and you'd say, okay, so I've got a really difficult conversation coming up with my boss. You would write a brief for the actor. And that brief would include the personality, the style, the content. And then what would happen is that actor would come in and play your boss. And therefore, what you've got is, if you've ever seen Whose Line Is It Anyway, the comedy show where the comedians interact with the audience, then you've got the chance to just have a go. So start with one and go, that's not quite working. I'm going to go softly, softly. So you try softly, softly. And the actors with the brief are able to respond in a particular way. So you get reaction, you get a mirror held up to you about how you're going to go, but also your peers are all sat around you going, I like this, but I wonder whether you could do it somehow differently. So you've got 20 million different ways you could have that conversation. But by the end of it, we aim to get you 15 to 20 different approaches that you could use to work in there. And it's brilliant. It's amazing how many people come back and go, 2 weeks later, say, I've had the conversation. You wouldn't believe. No, it worked.
Yeah, I love that, Colin. And we often talk about the importance of running it through your nervous system, because once you run it through your nervous system, you're more likely to actually do it when the need arises. So, yeah, I love that. Yeah. Okay, so managing up is the highest. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Especially, like when we're looking at that hierarchy and also the threat response. Like, most of us get feedback from our one-up manager, and usually that's just a single person bias around feedback. However, they have the greatest impact on the way in which we operate.
Yeah. And it goes back to something I was, one of your Australian counterparts, who's brilliant, runs a company called Fuel, based out of Sydney. He's a great guy. But he has a concept about whether people own their roles or rent their roles. And I don't know if you've ever heard it. And as soon as I heard it, I went, yeah, that's it. Because, when you're renting your role, you're looking for the landlord to do stuff for you. So your relationship with your boss is, well, you can do that. I'll wait for you. But when you own your own house, you go, whoa, hold on a second. This is my house. I'm going to paint it. I'm going to look after it. I'm going to decorate it. And, since I've got that, and I'm sure he's going to charge me royalties because I keep using it. But, it is just a brilliant concept to think about. Does this person own their role? But if their boss doesn't allow them to own their role, how do they get the boss to let them own their role? Bosses want people to own their roles. They want to live life.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I love that, rent your role or own your role. And we were having a conversation with someone who are in acting positions. And so one of the people decided that they were going to take the acting out of their email response, and they were going to own their role. So that was their opportunity to own their role. Tick, yes.
Yes.
So, good example.
I love it. Yeah.
So talking about your book, which I love the title, like Be More Wrong, If you could describe what your motivation for writing the book. So if I was to, why would I go out and read this book? What's in it for me?
So I'm going to use another author as your taster, James Clear, Atomic Habits. If you haven't, best book ever by a mile. Bow down. He is just phenomenal. But he did something which is similar, and he crystallized to me something where he said, we don't rise to the level of our objectives, we fall to the level of our systems. And so what this book is about is, how do I craft the systems as a leader, the systems of engaged teaming, the systems of energy, the systems of fresh ideas, and the systems of growth and capability growth. Plus, how do I bring confidence, conviction, connection to my leadership role? And rather than seeing it as here's tick list, here's the 10 behaviors you need to operate with, what this book talks about in a hero's journey concept is, how do I grow by experimenting? How do I build in innovation, design thinking, fresh ideas into the way? And how do I have an infinite mindset for my growth as a leader? So I've pulled together everything we've got around executive presence from our IP. I've pulled together the hero's journey. So whether you're a Frodo or a Lord of the Rings or a Harry Potter, whoever is your hero, there's a hero's journey. And what I love about the hero's journey is it gives people a chance to think about this as a step forward, not I need to do all of this. It's a step out, a journey. What's the first journey? What's the second journey? What's the third journey? And the iterative process of that. And that's what I've learned in my life, is that, all my screw ups are just small journeys. That I learn from, and 80% of them, 80% of everything I do probably fails. But if they're small enough and low enough risk, then we can work. So all we're doing is giving the readers a chance to think about their systems, their habits, their purposeful practice as a leader, and how they grow that. That's what it's about.
I love it. And I love that fact about, growing by experimenting. And so if I'm a leader in a team, how do I actually foster, what is one or two things that I can do as a leader to foster that environment that people feel safe enough to experiment, but don't override their, authority or delegation, so they don't really mess up big?
Yeah, I think the messing up big is a key thing, because the only way you can do it is by role modeling. So one of the things that we've implemented, which, and I steal with integrity. So there's a lot of things that are here that other people have written about and talked about. And Amazon have a fantastic process for leadership team meetings, where what they do is they get the person who's writing the proposal to write the proposal. And everybody at the beginning of the meeting is given the proposal for the first time. The first 10 minutes, everybody just reads the proposal. And then the person who has the least authority in the room, or least to do with the proposal, speaks first and gives their opinions. And everybody else goes around the room and gives their opinions and thoughts until you come to the person who's written the proposal. They are last. Now, there is a simple experiment that if you try it, you'll be amazed by the results. Because the quietest person, the lowest person in the room, tends to have some of the best bits of feedback, thoughts, ideas in there. So there's a one. So you've got a role model. The second thing is, it's about, if you think about there's two sides to our model, and building a mandate for your team is one of the key things. In other words, getting them to believe in you. And therefore, you've got to work them out. So if you think about it, you go to the gym, you're not going to go to the gym, just start. You're going to work out. So in a warm-up, how often do you warm your team up for meetings? How often do you do an exercise at the beginning of the meeting and try? And some of those exercises work, some of those don't. But just experimenting with those. So one of the things we experimented with is something called the Pulse on a morning, where at 9:15, which I'm missing this morning for the podcast, but 9:15 in the morning, the whole team gathered together and everybody shares what they're doing today, what they did yesterday, what they're doing tomorrow, based on Churchill's prayers. But the principle is that experiment we started, now we do it every day. We learn something, we hear what people are doing, not doing, and we picked it up. Other things we've tried and we stopped doing. Other meetings, we've probably had 10 different versions of our business meeting, our leadership meeting. And we just get to that point of going, okay, what's working? What do I like? What do I like? What do I wonder? Those are simple. Now, after a while, people go, can we stop? Can we just keep the meeting as it is? And that's when you know it's right. Yeah. But until that point, until people are so bought into it, they don't want to remove it and they don't want to change it, that's when you know we've got it right. But until that point, experiment.
Right. Great. I love that. And I love the idea of really focusing on, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, that's an example of inclusion. Include everyone in the way in which you operate and your processes and your systems. And one of the biggest operational excellence that we need as an organisation are team meetings. We need to have operational excellence, don't we? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Brené Brown has a brilliant podcast where I've forgotten the name of the lady, but she talks about team meetings, and she talks about how you operate and how you work them, and she's transformed her meetings. But it's amazing that somebody like a lifelong learner like Brené Brown will transform her team meetings, but she's always thinking about them, always what's working, what's the systems, how well are the systems operating, working. But you can't do anything until you've got an idea, practice it until it becomes a habit. Once it becomes a habit, then it becomes habitual. Then it becomes part of your system. So that's the mantra and the model we use to try and embed that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that idea about, like, what is the habit that I can engage in that will help me grow? So the two questions, what did I do well and what could I do differently? And have those questions that are non-judgmental. So I'm more likely to ask them as opposed to try and diminish myself or a situation. Yeah. So I'm interested in asking around, so the leaders who are operating their teams right now, listening to this podcast, if they were to, you've given us some great ideas around, shifting and experimenting in meetings and things like that, what do you think could be a really good habit forming, scenario that they could, just to start to experiment with, that would allow them to be more confident, have conviction and, connection?
Yeah. So I'm going to do one on a conversational piece that I love. And again, Michael Bungay-Stanier, Coaching Habit, good friend, brilliant, wrote the foreword for the book. And he has a very simple question I ask at the beginning. I coach professionally as well as internally. First question I always ask is, what's on your mind? Now, that simple question in a meeting, in a one-to-one, is the most powerful question. But the second most powerful, and he says the most powerful question, is, and what else? So at the beginning of every meeting, we say, what's on your mind and what else? And we almost call it the vomit. What are you going to, excuse the language, for anybody eating their dinner at the moment, apologies for the language, but what else are you going to get out of your mind and out of your head onto the table that you think is right? And using Zoom, we create a chat list. And we go and we say, okay, so what's the most important things out of there? But we allow people as a habit to get everything that's on their mind. And it's amazing because that chat's there. If there's other things that come up as we're talking about other things, they can add to them. So that's just a simple habit that actually identifies a lot of the things that are going on in your business, a lot of the pain points, as we call them, in people's minds, that allow you to do that. Do that in a coaching session. What's the classic bit? I mean, for all those coaches who use this question, I apologize. One of the questions I hate in a coaching session is, what would you like to get out of the coaching session today? Said at the beginning. Well, a lot of times, I don't know. And actually, my first idea in my head probably isn't the real issue. As a coach, it's by getting to the 10th or 11th issue in my head, we'll normally get to the real piece. So it's this organic habit that you do in one-to-ones and team meetings that allow you what's on your mind and what else, until you get to the point where they've got nothing more. And actually, it's quite cathartic to get all your issues out on the table. Yeah.
And there is something about, like most people want to be heard, they want to be understood, they want to be listened to, not necessarily solve their problems. And I love that backup question around what else, because it's demonstrating that you have that time, even though you may not, but you are interested in actually asking that question. And even if you do only have 5 minutes, like, I've got 5 minutes, but right now I am all yours. So tell me what's on your mind. And is there anything else? I just love the fact that we can use that in our toolkit right now. Like the power of questions is just brilliant. The difference is, are you going to use it?
Yeah.
And as soon as you hear something, you go, that's interesting. The time between you hearing something and it resonates and you doing it that will indicate, I think, the success that you are going to receive as a leader, because the difference between the knowing and the doing, they're very aligned and close. So,
Yeah. And I love, two things that I love on what you just said. The first one that's clicking into my mind is the immediate reaction from a lot of leaders is they hear something and they go, oh, I know the answer to that, and I'm going to give you well, that's simple. If that's all you've got. So it's that ability to go, and what else just stops you? I take notes as well. So I'm taking notes and just writing everything down. Yeah.
I'm taking notes now. Yeah.
So it stops your mind going into solution mode, but you're just listening. But Sarah Gardner, a good client friend, she said the most powerful bit for her is at the end of a meeting or a coaching session, even though she's the most busy person in the world, she will ask, and what else? So it's at the end of the meeting. So guess what? That person goes, I'm going to get more time from Sarah, the Sarah Gardner. I'm going to get more time from her. And she means it. But that simple piece at the end, they go, no, that is brilliant. That's what I needed. Or they go, well, I've got this, but why don't I just absorb this and go? It's, very simple. Leadership should be simple, Jan. For me, we make it more complex than it is. It's about connection with individuals, teams, having a purpose, having fresh ideas, having a story, telling your story, and then iterating and changing with confidence, conviction, and connection. That's leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. That's so well said. And I'd like to wrap up by asking, is there anything else?
Yeah. And what else? Yeah, good. Yeah. I mean, I think the key thing for me is about playgrounds. Yeah. And if I have something that goes back to my youth, but even just, I was up on holiday in Scotland and I looked out at the beach, and you see, you even when sitting in the caravan on the deck and you hear people screaming, laughing, you hear people like a swimming club are out in the middle of a freezing cold sea and they're laughing and joking. And you think about, where do our best ideas come? They normally come when people are in a safe space with soft place to land where they can go and they can operate. And therefore, I would leave people with a thought about, what playgrounds are you creating for people to stretch themselves and then to rest and then to grow. And if you're not doing those, then you're not treating your clients right, because our clients would always say, so what's next? What are you doing next year, Colin? What's coming next? They expect it. And my team sort of go, oh, God, we've got to do something different next year. So yeah, every year, whether it's luxury hotels, the Rosewood London, Claridge's, or it's the top technology companies, Accenture of this world, what is next? Everybody's looking for what's next. So those playgrounds, we should be constantly creating them for our teams to develop. Yeah.
Awesome. And having a safe place to land. I love that. Yeah. Thank you, Colin. That has just been, such an inspiring conversation. And I have written lots of notes. The biggest takeaway for me is to really review that question around the what else, is to give that person that space and the listening to hear what is really on their mind. So, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And if people want to make contact with you, I mean, we will have links, but what would be the easiest and direct way?
So through BeMoreWrong.com, the website, you'll find the book. You'll see the video. So you'll see that when it's ready, it'll be on there. But you'll be able to make contact with me through there. And then also Be More Wrong at Instagram. You make contact with me. I'd love to hear feedback. In my humble way, I would love to hear what I can do better in what I've done, even with the book. Be More Wrong, it's taken me 3 years to get out. It's quite ironic. It's taken me 3 years to get a book out that's called Be More Wrong. It should have been out after year one. But I'd love to hear feedback on what people think and what I can do differently. It would be great. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Colin.
Hey, Jan, thank you very much. And thank you to Michelle, wherever she is. Hope lockdown's not too bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the People Leaders Podcast. For show notes and other resources, please visit us at peopleleaderspodcast.com. And while you're there, you can subscribe for future episodes so you can continue your own leadership journey. And please be sure to share this and other episodes with your friends and colleagues. The People Leaders Podcast is brought to you by the Experts on Air Podcast Network.